Hi there, I'm Craig Wallebeck. First, I'd like to thank the RTDNA board for this award. I'm extremely humbled and honored to join past winners like Jim Smalley, Murray Wood, Wayne Mantique, and others in this extremely prestigious club. So, where does one even start? I've been involved in the broadcast industry for 6 decades. That's the 1970s, 80s, 90s, noughts, 10s and 20s. And who knew that A, I'd even last this long, and B, see some of the changes this industry's gone through. I will remember having to use a special booth for phone interviews back in the 70s, since we had to have a beep tone every 15 seconds to let the subject know they were being recorded. That was courtesy of the CRTC. That, fortunately, ended quite a few years ago. Other changes, of course, include the digitalization of newsrooms, gone are the old CNCP telecommunications teletypes, spitting out copy at a fast pace 60 words per minute, and typewriters with multiple carbons, including one for the spike, audio carts that sometimes wouldn't fire, they jumped to stop tone, tape stretch, even tape break. One thing that those audio carts did do extremely well, though, was shatter when someone would leave the booth and fling one across the room when it was fired, hitting a wall. Well, since I started back in 1976 in Red Deer, Alberta, a job I held for a monumental 6 whole weeks, a lot has happened both personally and in the news. For example, flash forward to December 2nd, 1980, Prince George, BC. Well, that's the night the first real big story broke on air, and of course it was the killing of John Lennon. Ironically, I interrupted an album feature with the Rolling Stones to deliver that news. Flash forward again to 1986 in High River, Alberta, when, as a board operator, I simply decided I was going to read the 10 o'clock news instead of having the BN report go. News director called me up the next day. Rather than fire me, which I expected, he offered me the morning news run, which I gladly accepted. A couple of years later, in 1988, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, I was given the assignment of putting together a 5-piece feature series on the Calgary Olympics, and I got to interview then Mayor Ralph Klein twice. Moving ahead to 1989 in Thunder Bay, Ontario, I was assigned there to cover the Dryden air crash inquiry while I was there. Moving on to Regina in 1997, I was hired to do mornings and eventually took over as news director in 2004. I also hosted a daily call-in show for several years. I was a member of the RTDNA board of directors, and I hope shaped what it's become now, even to a minor extent. And of course, in 2013, I moved here to Yorkton, where I'm still doing morning news, and I've even had to drive a combine a couple of times, which really isn't too bad for a city boy. Well, summing up a nearly 45-year career definitely is not easy, and these were just a few of the highlights. I've been asked if I would have preferred to have stayed in one place for my career, and while putting down deep roots is appealing, doing the WKRP thing has instead allowed me the opportunity to do things that I normally wouldn't have. For example, it let me interview people who an hour earlier were on the deck of the Titanic doing scientific research. It allowed me to tour a Canadian warship right down to the keel. It also allowed me the opportunity in 1993 to ask 2 questions of Marina Oswald. She's the widow of alleged Kennedy assassin Lee Harvey Oswald, and it was during a symposium on the JFK killing. It's also allowed me to talk to premiers in 4 different provinces and interview 3 men who would later go on to become Canada's Prime Minister. It's also allowed me to hold a torch used in the Vancouver Olympic relay, but that's not why I live and work. What some call the daily grind, I find just as important as breaking the big story, and that simply means on a daily basis, an hourly basis, getting news and views out to the people in our listening area. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank those who have helped me along the path. It's an extremely long list, and I'm afraid if I started naming all the names, I'd end up forgetting someone. Special thanks, though, must go to Brad and Doug. They are my current supervisors. Ryan, Craig, Matthew, and Benny in the newsroom. And of course, Danny, Tanya, and Evan, our daytime on-air staff. And if I missed anyone, I'm sorry. Once again, thank you very much for this award.